I hold a great reverence for slashers. If one genre has given us the most recognizable characters in fiction, horror is probably second only to comic books. And when you think of a horror character, I put money that you're thinking of a slasher first and foremost. The terror of this force of nature that seems just human enough to overcome. The nightmare that is one just looming over you. I may not like horror movies, but I love me a slasher. And you're telling me there's a game where I can play as one? Sign me up. The agony that I have faced. I feel a pain seeping into my blood, never to leave. This has felt less like a game and more of a test for humanity. Dead by Daylight is a wretched hellspawn that came not from the realm of some sort of Lovecraftian entity, but from biblical hell itself. Whew, that was overdramatic, huh? Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical multiplayer game released in 2016 by Behavior Interactive. The game is centered around one killer attempting to stop 4 survivors from escaping their grasp. It's pretty simple. So simple that they made it into a Roblox game. That's not an insult. Roblox is pretty nifty when it's not exploiting children for money and creators for a pittance. Dead by Daylight is a game built upon the foundations of slasher media. This concept wouldn't exist if not for the classic slasher films of the 80s and 90s. In fact, many of its original killers are spoofs or twists upon classic horror icons. But what did they build upon that foundation? A pretty good game that I despise with all of my heart, and an awful game that I just adore. Dead by Daylight is a nightmare of poor balancing, a dev team that makes questionable choices, licenses galore, a community that exists in an Ouroboros of hate, and so much more. Join me in the fog as we talk about the absolute state of Dead by Daylight in 2025. As stated before, Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical game, so there's quite a bit to talk about. I'll be separating this video into chunks, starting with... Before we talk about the gameplay itself, I think it's pretty important to talk about the core systems around said gameplay. I think Dead by Daylight is, at its core mechanical level, a perfectly designed game. If you want to be pedantic, Dead by Daylight is one big skill tree. When you start the game, everything is self-contained. Wesker can't use the Doctor's perks. You're stuck with the default character perks, of which there are 3, and a decent chunk of basic perks handed out through the Blood Web. The Blood Web is an entirely randomized skill tree, giving increased levels for perks you already have, new perks, offerings, and items or add-ons depending on your role. We'll get into those last few in the sections for each role. Each perk has 3 levels, and they get increasingly better with each number increase. I'd say there's probably never a situation where you want the level 2 perk over the level 3 one, for example. Offerings are single-use items that fill up their own slot. They can do a lot of things, including changing the likelihood of getting a particular map, showing you the hooks around the map, and increasing your blood point gain. But what's the end goal of all those blood points? How do you share your perks with other characters? How do you prove that you're just better? Well, that'd be by reaching Prestige 1. Prestige is gained upon reaching level 50, where the Blood Web will reset back to level 1, but with a fun new growth attached to your character. This little pimple means that the character's personal perks that I mentioned earlier are available for everyone's Blood Web, able to level up like normal. You can prestige up to 100 times, because some people hate being employed. Up to level 3, doing so puts the character's personal perks onto level 3 themselves, no longer requiring the work of using the Blood Web if you don't want to. The prestige system is why I'd call this game a perfectly designed game, specifically for the killer side. If you really want a character's perks for another, it forces you to play the game more to prestige them. When you do that, you're just getting better at the game. That's how it works. For killers specifically, that opens up the avenue of wanting to get used to the perk, which means you have to learn the power. You're giving yourself a more varied experience with the game in an attempt to reach a level goal. But you also don't have to play that character. I got Twins, Nurse, and Nemesis to Prestige 1 because I wanted their perks on Spring Boy Me Bob. Never even touched them. I call it the Nemesis pile. Ironically, Nemesis ended up crawling out. The Blood Web is a system that incentivizes you to play the game more without pulling any FOMO Battle Pass bullshit. Don't worry, they do that too. If you hit a level, leave for 2 years, and come back, you're still at that level. You're never going to lose content. Funnily enough, I'd probably say I had more fun on the whole with the blood web and building up my character than I did with the game itself. We'll get into that eventually. But I think we've orbited the gameplay long enough by now. Let's get right into... I'd call Survivor the main chunk of Dead by Daylight's gameplay, if only by a sheer numbers advantage. As the Survivor, your job is to sneak around the map and repair generators to power an exit gate, allowing you to leave. Playing Survivor, you can either load into the game solo or with up to 3 other people. This gives them a varying level of power determined by how friendless they are. A Survivor team is going to be made up of any of a few possible roles: harassing and distracting the killer, doing generators, healing, and wasting away on the hook. To do this, survivors have perks just like the killer does, but rather than a power, they have access to items. Items help a survivor excel at a specific role. Toolboxes help them repair generators faster. Medkits will help them heal other survivors faster, as well as heal themselves. Keys will let them see the location of their fellow survivors and the location of chests. While we're at it, chests allow a survivor to swap out the item they have for a random one. Maps. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen a survivor use one. Maps let them see the aura of pallets and vault spots within a certain range. Flashlights help them look like an idiot because I have Lightborn equipped. And no, I'm not taking it off! And, as of the writing of this script, a new item has been added in: the Fog Vial. Fog Vials let a survivor drop what's essentially a smoke bomb, limiting the killer's view of auras for simply far too long a distance. Look at this, it's like I've stepped into a nightclub. There's also firecrackers, except no, not anymore. The items are what make the survivor. Unlike killers, all items are usable on all survivors, making the choice of who you play nearly only cosmetic unless you're early in that prestige grind. Yes, there are perks, and some of them are crazy, but they don't open nearly as many doors as the killer's power does. So, the survivors have to escape. But how do they do that? Well, they need to power up an exit gate by repairing generators. They do this by performing quick time events, which is how you know this game is old. Name me a game that uses quick time events that released in the past 2 years. Can't hear you. This is a YouTube video, not a video call. Silly. The quick time events are a large part of the survivor side of Dead by Daylight, known as skill checks. You'll use them when repairing generators, when being manhandled by the killer, and when attempting to survive on the hook. Each survivor follows the same basic universal rules. You can run, crouch, vault over certain spots, do generators, and drop pallets. You have 2 hits you can take, called health states, before the killer can pick you up and stick you on a meat hook. I mentioned earlier that survivors each have a role. If you're playing with friends, this is something you can coordinate pretty easily. If not, just go in expecting to do whatever you want. Sure, you can adjust based on what items your teammates have, but that's not always a good tell. Distracting or harassing the killer is what I'd call the most skillful role a survivor can play, but don't quote me on that. Flashlights are typical for this gig, and it's not hard to see why. Literally. Your job here is to be the most annoying gnat possible. As a survivor, you may move ever so slightly slower than the killer, but you have a greater maneuverability and line of sight due to the third-person camera. What you're meant to do is find tiles around the map, certain parts that are distinct landmarks, such as rocks, cars, or a building. You run around that for as long as you possibly can, so help you. This is known as looping. Typically in these sections will be pallets, large hunks of... I don't need to explain what a pallet is, go work at Home Depot. An upright pallet can be dropped to form a barrier that the killer must either break or walk around. Dropping a pallet on top of the killer will cause a pallet stun, giving the perfect time for a flashlight blind or to make space. If the killer breaks the pallet, it's ideal to run to another tile to continue the loop. This will either cause the killer to become tilted, breaking their mental, or to run off and find someone more vulnerable, leaving you time to run off and do more gens. Speaking of generators, next up is, well, the generators. These are littered all across the map, and starting them leaves you to fill up a bar. Periodically, a skill check will appear, and you have to complete it to make progress. Failing will cause you to lose a chunk of that bar and cause what's called a loud noise notification, alerting the killer to your location. I wouldn't recommend sticking around. The further you get into completing the bar, the more noise the generator makes. When on the generator, you need to keep an eye out, as letting the killer sneak up on you will let him grab you instantly. Doing this is like crack, I wish I had footage. If you want to be the designated gen jockey, the toolbox is the recommended item. It even lets you sabotage hooks, you monster. Next up is healing, which is pretty self-explanatory. Fill up another bar? Hey, look at that, you're not bleeding on the entity's carpet anymore. Anyone can heal anyone else just fine, but healing yourself requires the medkit. Wow, a section I didn't need multiple breaks in my script for. And last, but certainly least, is role-playing as frozen meat. You being hooked is the end goal of the killer, and it's the least interactive part of the game. Yes, less interactive than QuickTime events. When hooked, your job, if you can even call it that, is to pray your teammates come and unhook you, or take advantage of a perk that lets you unhook yourself. Being hooked has 3 stages, and when you hit level 3, you're done. Level 2 starts throwing QuickTime events at you, and failing enough of them will progress you to level 3, and make sure you're no longer among the living. Any team has any combination of these, though they're not like roles in a hero shooter. Someone trying to gen jockey will still be able to heal a friend. Someone focused on generators can still loop you to high heaven. Survivors can even drop their items and find new ones to change roles on the fly. Probably not necessarily with friends, but it can come in clutch if you're alone. Or if you're abusing Streetwise. And that's pretty much the Survivor end of the game. I would personally argue that the game is very Survivor-sided, but I know some people would disagree. To me, it's simply a matter of numbers. 4 voices say one thing is overpowered, 1 disagrees. But, and I probably should have reiterated this earlier, I am very new to this game, and I mainly play Killer. Who knows what I'm missing because I lack the historic precedent. Speaking of Killer... Killer is, as I said before, my main draw to the game. The fantasy of being this unstoppable monster was instantly squashed the moment I played Dead by Daylight for myself. You're telling me that Michael Myers can be dealt with by hitting him with wood? Maybe they should have done that in Halloween 5. As the killer, your job is, quite obviously, to kill. Oh, sorry, unalive. I wouldn't want to anger the almighty YouTube algorithm. Oh no, it's coming from my 18 subscribers, run guys! The killer does this by making use of their power, the equivalent to items. As said before in the Survivor section, the power is tied to the killer. If you want Chucky's power, but like the aesthetics of the trickster, tough shit.
Fuck you and die!
The killer uses their power to either inflict status effects, damage, or both. The end goal is obviously to stick them on a meat hook, and then go get their friends when they start to scramble. Not every killer plays the same. Ghostface wants to crouch around and stare at you to fill up yet another bar. Try to play the clown like that and you'll get absolutely nowhere. I don't plan to break down every killer power like I did with the items. That would be insane to even give them a cursory glance. If you absolutely have to know, and absolutely have to learn in a way that isn't playing the game for yourself, I'll direct you to Rowby. He's made a video on most, or at least a good section of the killers in the game, and it'll also give you recommended builds. It's all from older versions of the game, but you get what you get and you don't dox the small YouTuber, as the saying goes. The killer is almost always on the back foot of any given trial. If a team of survivors knows what they're doing, there's a chance the gates are open before a killer can find one of them. That happened to me the other night, and it made my soul weep. The killer wanders around the map and gives chase if they run into someone. Depending on the killer, their way of running into someone is different, but the end result is almost always the chase. Or, again, crack. When a survivor runs, they leave scratch marks only the killer can see. Additionally, an injured survivor will leave puddles of blood. Both are hard to see, and can be made harder to see with perks or bad map RNG. Good luck playing Spirit on the swamp map, fuckhead. Ultimately, most chases end up turning into loops. Not only is it a way to prolong your own life, but it lets your teammates get more work done while you distract the killer. A killer's viability, then, hinges on how well they can deal with loops. Look at Nurse and then look at Trapper and tell me there's a god, I dare you. Where the survivors have mobility on their side, the killer, with some exceptions to that mobility thing, have lethality. Universally, killers can attack, perform a lunge attack with more range but more cooldown, use their power, break pallets, and vault, albeit much slower than how survivors do. So much slower, I'd argue it's not worth it. Additionally, killers can kick generators that have been started but aren't completed, and break certain specific doorways wide open. Killers tend to follow certain archetypes, and while I said I wouldn't break down powers, I never said I wouldn't use examples. Unlike survivors who can switch on the fly, killers stuck with the archetype they queued in with. I can't seem to find a definitive list of archetypes like you'd find in, say, a fighting game, but here's my interpretation. Dash killers, who move with great bursts of speed, often needing to charge before they can do so. Projectile killers, who range anything from I'm 4 feet away to I may as well be in a different time zone. Stealth killers, who really embody that classic slasher menace up until you give them a really mean look and it hurts their feelings. Trapped killers. There's 3, and they're bad. And speed killers, not to be confused with dash killers. There's 1, and they're bad. Killers can absolutely be a mix of these 5 archetypes. Hell, there are some that don't even really fall under any of these. You may call my archetypes a failure then, but it's too late to take back your watch time. What determines how good a killer is, in terms of tier lists, is how well they can deal with all of the survivor roles at once. My main, Springtrap, is really easy to loop, for example. And so is Trapper, universally considered one of the worst characters in the game. Dash killers are generally pretty good. So good no one will play against you. Why? Because Blight runs around like a goddamn pinball machine on crack. And not the good kind. The ability to transition into picking off a different person is so good and so pivotal that a killer launched who had the capability to do everything while still remaining hyper-lethal, and they nerfed them into the floor after people complained. I'm sure you can tell by the tone of my voice, but this is the part of the video where I get salty. I've got to sit on Survive with Friends or I'm toxic, but you guys cry enough and Legion got old Yellard. How's that fair? Regardless, most killers are viable at my level of the game. It's a play what you want kind of game around here. None of that esports stuff, save that for my Guilty Gear videos. And with that, the killer part of the video is done. Or so I think. Out of script note, I'm not super happy with this. I think I'm going to come back. I feel like I'm missing something. Whatever, you people will comment if I did. Now that we've gone through, it's time we show up at the other end. You know what that means. More circling of a drain we've already covered. I love me a good crossover. People can go on and on about how it can ruin the sanctity of a game or whatever, but you're wasting your breath on a BB Tag fan here. It should be rather obvious that Dead by Daylight had a massive boom in popularity due to Five Nights at Freddy's inclusion. Due to this, the suspects you'd expect have begun to decry licenses and casual players, as if the two are a package deal. And while I think this drama has already died down, I'm still speaking on it because it's my video and no one can stop me. The licenses are some of the coolest things about this game. I like a good Legion or Spirit, but do you really think they'd sell you? Well, I guess they did, given that the game didn't launch with horror licenses up the wazoo. Listen, more people playing a game is never a bad thing. Every time someone tries to make a case for gatekeeping anything from anyone, it leaves a weird taste in my mouth. What do you mean you don't want a thing you like to attract more people? Come on, just admit you want Nick Cage for yourself.
Don't do this to me, I'm not a worm!
I don't blame you, he was Ghost Rider. And Superman once, but we don't talk about that. And these licensed characters are some of the coolest in the game, because they make the devs think outside the box. I think Ripley is some of the coolest perks to go up against as a killer. And you're about to tell me you guys don't like Leon Kennedy? I don't believe you, I've seen the Leon Brigade too many times to count. They're just cool. More people means more money means more quality product. Hopefully. You never know, they could always just lay off 95 people again and add another broken glitch. The further I get into Dead by Daylight, and the more I realize how pivotal maps are, especially for certain killers. Survivors don't tend to care as much, and if they do, it's for personal taste reasons, which is perfectly understandable. Maps are between two types, indoors and outdoors. Like with everything else, it's not mutually exclusive, so there's plenty of mainly indoors maps that have outside sections, like RPG, or vice versa. Even between indoors and outdoors maps, there's a clear schism between maps designed pre-layoffs and post-layoffs. They had to stick Freddy Fazbear's in a pre-existing map. Just don't fire people, man. Is that so hard? Certain killers thrive or die on certain maps. Chucky on Backwater Swamp? Forget about it. The survivors might as well play with their eyes closed. Spirit on that same map, it's the killer who may as well close their eyes. See, it goes both ways sometimes, guys. The best killer designs will work on any maps. This means that the survivor will have more chances too, if the killer doesn't have an innate advantage due to map RNG. Sometimes we thrive together, guys. We don't need to eat the other side's tail here. Overall, I'd call maps as a whole serviceable. Some backwater-shaped exceptions. But you! I have several problems with offerings that alter the RNG of being sent to certain maps. For starters, it's not getting rid of the RNG, just twisting it into your favor. Not even like a loaded dice favor, more like using a dice you just swear is lucky, guys, trust me. And why do they have to be secret? Is it core to some strategy I'm not smart enough to develop or comprehend, that no one knows it was maybe me who sent us to Macmillan Estate as opposed to normal RNG? And I'm sorry, but this is the main point. You're using an item slot with no guarantee that it'll actually be useful. I don't get you, behavior. Oh, that's, alright, we could talk about balancing, yeah. Behavior seems to have gone to the Arc System Works school of being batshit insane with your patches and updates. Unlike ArcSys, though, Behavior seems to think fixing one thing means stomping another into the dirt. They broke a loading screen for Sobek's sake! Have you ever seen another company do that? I hopped into the game when Springtrap was introduced. I have yet to really experience what most of the player base has for the past 9 years. But what I have seen is a conveniently one-sided glitch, a busted loading screen, and residue in the community that only points to one thing. This has happened before. Look, I don't want to harp on something that happened almost a year ago. I'm not a Twitter user, those days are far behind me. But you don't exactly have a good look going when you lay off 95 employees and every single patch has some major problem. Though it's not exactly a new phenomena, is it? Seems like every killer is waiting in line with a baseball bat ready to beat Behavior over the knees for how they were launched into the public. I don't mean to single out twins, but I'm definitely singling out twins. This feeds into a deeper issue with Dead by Daylight 2. It's known for having a bit of a toxic community. And unlike Sonic, I'd argue this is actually deserved and not an attack on autistic people and young teenagers figuring themselves out through characters they love. But do you want to see me rant about Sonic or Dead by Daylight? Dead by Daylight is naturally going to have a bit of a divided community. This isn't like in Fortnite, where every person is playing exactly the same. Dead by Daylight is, as you should obviously know by now if you've been paying attention, and you have been paying attention, right? An asymmetrical multiplayer game. The key word there being asymmetrical. There's a reason I talked about both playstyles separately as opposed to, say, together, analyzing how they interacted in and out. And that's because they're so divided, they play so naturally different. Not as different as in, say, a fighting game, but different nonetheless. In addition to me coming to the game originally to get the fantasy of a slasher, I can't do QuickTime events. They stress me out, and I don't play Survivor because of that. And you could say, oh, well don't play a horror game if you don't want to be stressed out. But this has long since not been a horror game. This is a competitive game, be honest. What's worse is that Behavior seems to balance them super differently. Part of why I believe the game is cited to survivors is that they seem to get new toys to play with, while we just keep getting tweaks to ours. The division, the balancing, and everything else about the game forms an us versus them narrative in our minds. Here's the part where I admit to being part of the problem. I'm part of the problem. I do not like Survivor players. I'm getting used to it, I promise, but I'm exhausted from being teabagged at the gate. If I want to deal with it, I gotta go by Dracula, and I don't wanna! And so, after a game where I lose hard and get teabagged at the gate, I go be an ass online, posting something passive-aggressive. That gives a Survivor player the chance to go, oh, look at this, killers are all so sweaty and toxic, and proceed to do whatever they want now that the other group has been othered in their mind. And then in response, the killer starts tunneling. Side note, I think tunneling is fine. I'm not going to pick you all off slower than necessary. That gives you more time to win. Something, if it's in the game, I'll use it. Call it a carryover from my time with fighting games, where abusing the strong tool until your opponent knows how to deal with it is part of the genre.
Welcome to the real world!
Okay, that's a cheat move. That's a cheat move.
Welcome to the real world! Time to learn! You gonna learn today!
Isn't that why you guys are using Streetwise the way you are? The Dead by Daylight community has gone so far off the rails that there's even an imaginary playbook. Unfortunately, I don't have my imaginary reading glasses to read the imaginary book, so I'm gonna stay here in reality while you guys cry that I'm not, leaving you on the floor for 8 seconds before hooking you or whatever the hell. Look, fundamentally, what I'm trying to get at here is that I've taken a sip of that my role is for cool people and yours is for assholes juice, and I don't plan to stop, no matter how bad I know it actually tastes, and no matter how much I know it's bad for me. But I'm also acutely aware of why it's happened, and why it's such a stain, and what it's led to. The Dead by Daylight Rage subreddit being the worst thing I've ever seen, my god. These people don't let you rage in the Rage subreddit. They go on about how actually you're wrong and what happened was your fault. So if the game is a balanced clusterfuck, the developers hurt the game as much as they help, and the community is in a feedback loop of mental violence, why do we keep playing? This isn't like Ubisoft, where you get paid to play Brawlhalla, because no way in hell are people actually playing that shit. And if they are, go play Rivals, it will change your life. Dead by Daylight is your awful on-again, off-again girlfriend. The drama is high, the sex varies in quality, and occasionally you want to stab her. To claim this game is bad is... well, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but it's not accurate to how I feel. I love this game, even if it doesn't love me back. This game has something. Cool ideas, awesome lore, and a very clear love for the classic slashers that make horror so great. I suppose it's only fitting that we, too, the players, are caught in the realm we cannot escape. The realm of that really hot girlfriend we keep crawling back to. We can rage against the walls of this cage all we want, but it's because we know it can be better. Every low followed the high that made it oh so crushing. Every miss swing comes with a sick as fuck trick shot. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to say I love this game. I've been burnt in the past by games that had my heart and just didn't know how to keep it. But what makes me smile is that no matter the role, and as corny as it sounds, we all like Dead by Daylight. We all play it, we all want it to do well. The Ouroboros may eat itself for eternity, but each snake is driven by a shared hunger. And I, for one, could use a bite to eat. Hey, I got the family back together after, 3 months? It's been a roller coaster over here, just getting a computer all set up. And, it was my first time really saving money for something big, so I'm really happy with being able to get back to it. And I think the setup is, as a whole, better. I feel really good about this video. And thank you for being here along the wait. I hope to see you again.